Hi, I've got an explosive mix for you in this one. Great hits, unknown gems, and a game that sucks pretty bad too. So let's not waste any more time and get on with it. Dungeon Siege is a top-down 3D action role-playing that's conceptually similar to Diablo, meaning it's entirely mouse-driven, combat-focused and linear. Now, so that we're clear here, neither of these are complaints, most of action RPGs are like that and it's hard to fault one for following the trends. Especially that the story is pretty decently written and fun to follow. Interestingly enough, unlike all other games in the genre, Dungeon Siege doesn't offer a choice of classes and instead you get to build and customize your character to your liking by improving 4 skills of melee, ranged, nature and combat magic. What's more, you improve them by using them, and the more you utilize a particular one, the faster it gets better. As the skills improve, so do the corresponding to them attributes of strength, dexterity and intelligence. It's an unusual approach to character progression, but works quite well actually and doesn't get in the way of action-packed gameplay. The dungeons and other maps are not randomized, which is a bit of a letdown, but all the items are, so at least there's that, and not knowing what item will drop from a particular mob is always fun. Cause you may as well get the ultimate sort of heavenly destruction or a bread knife. Both are as fun, but have completely different use case scenarios. One's used to conquer the universes, kill thousands, if not millions of mobs and countless bosses. And the other is that ultimate sort of heavenly destruction. A pretty cool option that's not common in similar games is the ability to recruit up to 6 other adventurers to travel with you. And a mule too. And he's worth like at least 2-3 other companions being as cute as he is, so yeah, don't forget about the mule. You can set those companions in a formation and even assign some basic tactics to them. They're not very deep, the tactics that is, but it's better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them, I suppose. Overall, if you're a fan of action RPGs, Dungeon Siege is a pretty fun entry in the genre, and especially because there's a lot of extra fan-made content available for it online. You just gotta give it a minute, do a little research, and new campaigns, stories and items will be at a hand's reach. Resident Evil games, next to maybe Silent Hill only, are considered a staple, nay, a benchmark for survivor horror adventures, titles most gamers know and appreciate, and many love. And Resident Evil Survivor is not that at all. It's not a terrible and unplayable mess that people made it out to be, but it's definitely nowhere near the quality you'd expect from such renowned series. Unlike traditional entries that were all third-person view and featured pre-rendered backgrounds on which real-time characters, monsters and items were overlaid, Survivor is in first-person view and it's made to be played with a light gun. It works without it too naturally, but the controls and most importantly how it feels without that controller is a bit off. It's not unplayable, mind you, but you can tell that it was made with a light gun in mind and everything else was just added later on. That said, and all things considered, it's decent at best. The ammo for the base gun is unlimited, which is kinda understandable, but also defeats the spirit of Resident Evil entirely, where every and each piece of ammo was always of high importance as you just never had too much of it. But whatever, at least stronger weapons are limited, so that's fine I suppose. What is not fine though is the fact that despite there being quite a few different monsters included, some of your faves from earlier games too, other than the few occasional jump scares, the game is unexpectedly easy. Like way too easy to be considered a true Resident Evil, which were known for keeping you on your toes. If you know what you're doing in Survivor, you can actually complete it in around 2 hours with very little replayability left for potential future plays. Because while there is a certain degree of variety in pathways that you can take from time to time, they all lead to the same place, always. Survivor is set few years after the events of Resident Evil 2 and 3 and in an unknown town that served as an umbrella test grounds. You play as Vincent, a man who woken up in the middle of the city on Sheena Island, not knowing who or where he is, and having to piece together his own identity and past, all the while staying alive. And yes, while the setup is decent and the game will feed you bits and pieces as you go, the plot will never get any less cliché or better. If you have any other games in the series or genre on your to playlist, focus on them. If not, then Survivor may be worth a look and maybe a single playthrough. Mafia is definitely a highlight of today's video and a title that was spectacular when it released. It is a great game to this day and even received a remake a few years back, proving once again how much interest there was still in it. It's a third-person perspective story-driven action-adventure game that's mechanically similar to Grand Theft Auto 3, with a difference of it being set in a fictional city of Lost Haven, modeled after New York and Chicago, and in the 1930s Prohibition era of US history. So fun times. Other than that, city traversal, both on foot and in cars, how weapons work, how you interact with the world, and mission-based plot progression is almost identical to Rockstar's classic. In fact, the origin story, while nowhere near similar to GTA 3, has a very alike vibe to it. You know, of your character having been dragged by circumstances into a life of crime, and not only finding his way of living in it, but also quite surprisingly thriving. You're playing as Tommy Angelo, an ordinary taxi driver by day and a heartbreaker with stellar hairline by night. He makes his living delivering passengers and spends money on girls, booze and expensive cigars. His life is anything but action-packed, and he goes through it day by day, never really expecting anything special to occur. Well, other than those girls, booze and cigars. Until one of those days, that is. When two men jump in his cab, tell him to drive as fast as he can, just to leave him in a position of not only being chased by a car full of angry mobsters, but also actively fired upon. Now, this is not something anyone would want to happen to them, and Tommy is no different. But given how crafty of a driver he was, how stupid Cole would have been to stop then and there, and how well he knew the city, he got his passengers to safety and in a record time. Well, that last bit is for the fluff purpose here only, as there was no one there with a stopwatch monitoring how long it took him. Impressed with Tommy's uncanny driving skills, the two men offer him a job in the Mafia. Initially he's not into it at all, as you know, not only it's rather dangerous, but also hours are quite fluid, and you just never know when you may be called in and what for. But as his cab is destroyed by two rival Mafia family gangsters the following day, Tommy takes it personally. I mean, all he has in his life is his job, his ladies of the night and that beautiful stylish cab, which at the time was neither beautiful nor stylish and most definitely not capable of driving anyone anywhere anymore. So upset, angry and a little bit curious, Tommy decides to take the offer the two gentlemen from the previous night gave him and joins the Salieri family, and that's how our game begins. While I wouldn't say that Mafia's story was of Mario Puzo's writing quality, it was still heads and shoulders above what was in most games on the market, and that, complemented by a stellar presentation, made it an excellent title that was and is one of the most fun games ever made. Well, provided you care for the mob team of it and a lot of shooting and driving. The first Soldier of Fortune game was one of the most brutal, bloody and also fun FPS games of its time. It had a decent, even if not great story, but where it mattered, so gameplay, it sure as hell delivered. It pulled no punches, it didn't try to censor anything, and served as a game that was as action-packed as it was gruesome, because dismemberments were pretty strong with that one. And Soldier of Fortune 2 Double Helix is no different. There is an obvious bump up in the quality department, with it now running on Quake-3 Arena's engine and offering models with 36 unique damage zones each and 16 dismemberment points. What does it mean for an average gamer though? Well, it means that if you shoot someone in the shin, ass or his big toe, the damage should be visible on that part of their body and not just a general location, and also that if you're a surgeon with your shotgun, the limbs will fly far and wide and you'll be tripping over all the countless disconnected fingers covering the floor. I may be exaggerating a bit, but even if I am, it's just by a little. It may all feel like a bit too much, and I get that. I mean, all the blood, wounds and limbs are really not necessary for it to work as a game, but they were also not necessary in Mortal Kombat, and it was so gosh darn popular. It's the same case with Soldier of Fortune 2. Without all that, it's just a decent game and one to let some steam off with. But with it included, it's Soldier of freaking Fortune 2, and that's how most of us remember it. Oh, and the enemy AI is no slouch this time, as not only they will try to hide behind covers or encircle you, but also when they have their guns shot out of their hands, they'll reach for their sidearm, and when they'll run out of ammo for that too, they may even look for a gun on the floor to pick up and use. It doesn't seem like much, but actually makes a huge difference when playing. Now, the story. Well, sadly it's not great. It's something about you being a jack-of-all-trades mercenary and fighting against a terrorist organization that's threatening to release a deadly Gemini virus on the world. It's a bit flat and doesn't get much better along the way, but the gameplay carries it all, and Soldier of Fortune 2 is still worth a playthrough. Aftershocked is probably the worst looking game that you've seen for quite some time and also the most charming one. The simplicity of its presentation makes it equally as appealing as off-putting, and how you feel about it is something very personal. Me? Well, I think it's terrible, and I love it. The music is considerably better, though still not great, and because of that I'm a bit disappointed with it, as it's not so bad to be amazing, but not good enough to be anything I'll hum, whistle or carry on with me as my in-head live soundtrack for a week or two. On a side note, do you guys get those too? In-head soundtracks for your life that play out when life goes on for a while, just to have them disappear a day or two later, just like that, for no reason. Make sure to let me know in the comments below, or telepathically, that works too. To initiate the mental link, you gotta press that bell icon under the video, trust me. Anyway, with all that out of the way, we've got a game left to talk about, and it's surprisingly good. I mean, this video series mostly covers commercial games, and yet, with this one I decided to go the freeware route. And I don't usually do it unless there's something really special about a particular game. And there is. It's a post-apocalyptic, point-and-click humorous adventure. It's not a Monkey Island type of a humor though, it's something more akin to what you're likely to find in an episode of South Park, so silly, sometimes downright stupid, and nearly always upsetting some kind of minority, or based on a racial, sexual, or cultural stereotypes. If you can't suspend political correctness for a minute to laugh at the silliness that it is based on, it's not gonna be a game for you, and you should definitely skip it. But if you're capable of mentally understanding the difference between an entertainment medium like a video game and your real worldview and opinions, and you know that they don't have to reflect each other at all, you may actually find Aftershocked quite amusing. Really, really, really stupid, but also fun. Aftershocked is set in a distant, dark and terrible far-off future of 2003. Yup, the year that the Earth stood still. Nope, wrong script, sorry. Let's try again. The year that nothing of note happened, other than the little thing that we like to call the end of all. Even an incredibly unphotogenic dictator going by the name of Hitler, Adolf Hitler, launched series of nuclear missiles, destroying most major cities in the world, and leaving it in a state of burnt toast. So hot, charred and unattractive. Only 2 cities prevailed, and one of them is Scabsborough, a once beautiful town that's now possibly the most beautiful one in the world, which is not that tough given that there are only 2 left. How it avoided destruction, no one knows, but Hitler's not one to leave things unfinished, so playing as Jimmy, a brother of Bimmy, I wonder if any of you will get the reference. You have to find a way to stop the Hitler from destroying Scabsborough and its surviving sister city of Utopiaville, known for its water parks, jumbo hot dogs and stupid name. So, if you want a game that takes jabs at everything and everyone, even itself, and is also fun and uniquely looking, play Monkey Island. But if that's not an option, I suppose Aftershocked will do too. Jeff Cramont was well known for his revolutionary refs on C64 and then Grand Prix games on Amiga and PC, and Grand Prix 4 is another of his excellent releases. It may be more of an evolution rather than revolution, but since all the previous games in the series were rather great, this one builds on what they established and ends up being as good of a title, if you're into F1 simulations that is. The game is naturally based on the 2001 F1 season and features all 22 drivers, 11 teams and 17 courses from that year. What's more, it even recreated real weather conditions from particular races, so if you'd like to change a result you've seen and not liked, it's not outside the scope of possibility. The graphics and AI have been considerably improved since the previous entry, and the computer-controlled drivers now really try to fight for the spots and will actively seek ways to prevent you from grabbing any. It's a pleasure to watch in action and even more pleasure to finally overcome them and leave them behind. The fine-tuning of stuff like brake balance, gear ratio, swing and ride height, dampers, suspension and so on is naturally back and better than ever, and the damage model is really good too. I mean, if you're as good of a driver as myself, you'll see wings tear off your bolide, parts flying all over, and wheels disconnecting and carrying on rolling long after you've stopped on a wall somewhere. It's great. So, one might think that nothing had changed since the earlier entries and that GP4 was still hands down the best F1 game when it released, but it was not the case really. I mean, in terms of AI, tuning and realism it was, but other titles like F1 2002 were a very solid gameplay-wise and better looking competition, and it kinda explains why Grand Prix 4 was the last F1 game Jeff Cramont worked on. Archangel is a third-person action-adventure title that mixes fantasy and sci-fi themes in equal measures, creating a very unique and one-of-a-kind gaming experience. While on the first glance it may appear Archangel is your typical third-person action game with all the running around and sword-slashing, but it's not all that. Because early in the game you'll met by a powerful mythical and godlike being known as the Lord of Light, who'll give you a choice of one of 2 paths to follow. Either a powerful warrior or a ghost-like being, so a warrior and thief/rogue respectively. The choice is permanent and stays with you throughout your entire adventure, offering not only different skills and abilities but also shaping the entire gameplay loop. So it may be worth playing for Archangel twice to experience everything that it has to offer. Not necessarily in a row, but it's worth to keep in mind that these 2 playthroughs would differ considerably. The game is split into 3 chapters set in different time periods from medieval to future, and along your adventure you'll get to find and use different weapons and acquire new skills, magical or otherwise. You use your spirit energy to power spells and magical weapons. Essence points are awarded for killing enemies and can be used to either upgrade current or purchase new spells. And there's quite a few of these, mostly support like shields, invisibility and healing. Since Archangel was dipped a little in RPG 2, along your main mission that we'll talk about soon, there are also a lot of additional smaller side quests in the game, and the NPCs that you get to meet and interact with all seem believable, having their own daily scheduling and acting as if they could have lived their lives, even if you were not there to witness. You play as Michael Travinsky and you're driving in your car to, well, I don't really know where, to do your shopping, to church, or to place your vote in the elections, whatever. Point is, you're speeding along a bendy road until you're not anymore. And when you wake up, it appears as if you were in a car crash and somehow found yourself lying on a cold stone floor of an ancient monastery. As you gather your bearings, you are approached by a monk from an unknown to you yet order, who, while incapable of telling you anything about who you are and how you got there, already have quite big plans for your soon-to-be future. A future in which you'll not only visit 3 different realms, so Middle Ages, the year 2039 and the Realm of Darkness, which funny enough the devs decided to make something else and not my work office, despite it being it, but you'll get to decide the fate of humanity, which is a responsibility unlike any, but if not you, then who else is better to do so? Whenever I talk about Star Trek games that are not RTSs, I make it my point to remind you why I love it. And it's the general idea of us in the future not being from specific countries, but just Earthlings and a part of bigger something, United Federation of Planets. I love the idea of humans eventually growing up to be able to live with others in peace and not constantly seeking power or wealth above all. And Star Trek Bridge Commander is probably the best Star Trek game ever made, if you don't mind it not tackling any away missions at all. I mean, it is called Bridge Commander, so it's hard to fault it for that. What is it all about then, other than warming up of seats of the titular bridge, that is, you may wonder? Well, it's probably the only chance you'll ever get not only to step on a bridge of a Federation ship, but also command one. And you can do it in 2 ways, either by issuing commands to your bridge crew in first-person view or by controlling the ship directly in third-person behind the ship camera. While the game is not only about combat, and it should not be a surprise as Star Trek is not about that at all, it plays a huge role in Bridge Commander and you'll see a lot of enemy ships in various stages of destruction. Caused by you naturally, as you're the best Federation tactician that there ever was. Yes, you. So since we're on the combat, a few things have to be mentioned. First of all, ship models, which are all fantastic, very detailed and looking exactly like you'd expect them to, especially if you're a fan of the Next Generation series, as that's more or less when the game is set. Secondly, the weapons and damage. While the effects are a mixed bag, some look and sound better than the others, all are very similar to what we're used to from TV and can be used with a near-perfect accuracy. Meaning that the damage model allows, with a bit of patience and skill that is, to not only target particular parts of the enemy ships like nacelles, warp drive weapons and whatnot, but also even cut out particular parts of the ships off. It takes time, but it's doable. And finally, the power allocation to different systems works exactly like you expect it to, so you'll be juggling it throughout all the battles, switching between engines, shields, weapons and so on, all the while repairing what's been damaged and aiming for the crucial systems on the opponent's vessel. It's super fun. And now for the story. A sudden and unexpected explosion of a star that went nova wipes half of the Vesuvius system, killing your former captain too. Since you're a highest ranking officer though, that means a fast promotion and you're given his command and are assigned with investigating the mysterious explosion and its source in the region of space known as Maelstrom. While this setup may sound simple and rather flat at first glance, it's anything but, and as you progress through 8 episodes Bridge Commander is split into, it will gradually build upon, revealing more and more interesting details about an overarching plot and putting you in the position of being the only one capable of solving this space puzzle. Other than the combat big and small, you'll also have missions of exploration, ferrying of supplies or helping other ships and colonies. Other than the older point-and-click adventures, and I mean those from the early 90s and not the later stuff, Bridge Commander is probably the best and most true to life, or true to fiction actually, Star Trek game ever made. And if you're a fan, you should definitely try it out. Oh, and there are literally hundreds if not thousands of mods for it online, adding countless ships, better graphics and special effects. It's basically infinitely replayable. Project Nomads is such an unusual mixture of ideas that it truly was a nomad on a video gaming landscape of 2002, for better or worse. Well, worse in this case, but we'll get there soon enough. It tried mixing action shooting with third-person perspective strategy similar to that of Sacrifice, and all of that built around the concept of islands floating in the skies similar to 1997's Netstorm. And it failed. Well, at least it failed at becoming something big and noteworthy, because as a game, it does technically work and can be fun for short bursts from time to time. Holding your attention for longer though is not something that I would bet any money on. Especially that most extra that it does so superficially and ends up just being an average, very generic third-person action shooter. Which is not a bad thing at all, just not what it aimed to do. The island is your home, your base, and you have to defend it. So you'll be erecting buildings that generate the energy, which is your main resource, those that build bombers and fighters that you can jump into and fly around killing stuff, and turrets that can be used to gun down oncoming enemies. And while the turrets can operate quite well autonomously protecting your island, the AI for planes straight up suck, and you're better off jumping in and piloting this yourself. And while not all missions that you'll partake in are the same, with some of them trying to do something new and unexpected, with different results I must add, most that you'll do is run around and shoot stuff. Which is not bad if you like shooters, but the variety is not Project Nomad's strongest suit and the repetition may and will settle in fast. The enemies are all giant insects that for whatever the reason chose your island as their target, and all you'll be doing is debugging the island, pun intended, and slowly getting more and more tired with the gameplay loop. Project Nomad's story is about exploring these floating islands and discovering the secrets of a mysterious and long-dead race of the so-called master builders. You know, first recorded Minecraft YouTubers who've created the most impressive worlds ever. But it's so random and the missions feel so disconnected that I can't fathom for the life of me the general idea behind it. And whether it's explained better later on or not, I will never know, as I've never completed the game and don't plan on doing it anytime soon. It's just not worth my time, I feel. Soldiers of Anarchy is often forgotten or ignored, but actually pretty good squad-based real-time strategy. And one that's not just a series of random missions, but has an overarching and post-apocalyptic themed plot too. So, in the fictional quote-unquote future of 2015, 10 years after deadly man-made virus killed billions across the planet, 4 soldiers leave the bunker they've spent this entire time in, waiting for the right and safe time to emerge. And while the right time was then and there, it seemed that the safe one would never happen, as the outside world is devastated, barren and split into territories controlled by always warring with each other gangs. Sporadic groups of survivors that are not associated with these groups are all self-sustaining and spread far and wide, surviving mainly on scavenging. Your mission, even if unknown to you at first, is to try to find a way to eventually restore order and civilization. While Soldiers of Anarchy is definitely an RTS, it's more similar to titles like Company of Heroes rather than Command and Conquer. You have a team of soldiers which will eventually grow in number, and you lead them through a series of story-based missions, completely disregarding any base building or resource gathering. These soldiers start with very basic armament, but as you progress, you'll find and gain access to many different weapons and pieces of gear, and will be able to even customize loadouts for your squad before each mission, which is a nice and welcome addition. Missions have their own unique plot-related objectives, and while these don't change on consecutive playthroughs, additional secondary tasks can be unlocked during some missions, adding a lot to the replayability. As your soldiers survive more and more encounters, they may improve their combat and support skills, becoming more valuable to your team and potential future success of the entire campaign. There are vehicles in Soldiers of Anarchy too, and they are commanded, equipped and upgraded in the same way your soldiers are, but they require to assign your troops to be able to use them. And more often than not, you should, as those APCs, tanks, helicopters and fighter planes can often decide whether a particular mission will end in a favorable way. I don't say it often about RTSs, but the plot is truly a highlight of this one. It may be a personal thing, as I'm a sucker for all things post-apo, even if I would never want to see the world after such an event in real life, but it's worth mentioning that the story never feels flat, and the graphics complementing it add a lot of flavor too. All in all, other than the lack of a simple-to-implement option of issuing commands when the game is paused, Soldiers of Anarchy don't disappoint and will provide a lot of fun if you give it a chance. 2002 is in full swing, and I've plenty of great games saved up for future videos. So, if you're keen to learn what they'll be, make sure to like, subscribe and smash that bell to be notified whenever I release something new. So, take care, eat great food, be yourself and play games.